We cover all costs of certain utilities owned and utility operated offshore wind generating facilities. That's what the two bills speaking of. The committee, Mr. Chairman, voted on both bills to report to the full committee 4-1. Also, it says that there may be a substitute on both bills.
Yes, sir.
And Senator Mason has 860.
Mr. Chairman, there are substitutes to both bills, my bill number 860 and Senator Lucas's bill number, help me there, please, I'm sorry. 990. Our bills are nearly identical with one distinctive paragraph that is different. We, on behalf of Senator Lucas, I hand-delivered the substitute to your offices on Thursday.
Yes.
So you'd have the opportunity to see it in advance. And if you'd like, Mr. Chairman, I'll take you quickly through the combined bill.
Okay.
If you like, okay. So, Mr. Chairman, if you're, so I move the substitute.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that the substitute be adopted. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Substitute's before us.
And if everyone has a copy of the substitute, Section A is identical to my bill, which reads 50, my previous bill, which reads 5,200 megawatts as being in the public interest into the code. We're already seeing economic development, advancements, and opportunities around the Port of Virginia. This is incredibly important to signal to the industry we're serious about wind on an ongoing basis. Starting on line 17 in paragraph B, this is Senator Lucas's language, virtually to a T, that speaks to one particular project
thank you.
of no less than 2,500 megawatts and no more than 3,000. That's the first major project. Down on line, sorry, I'm trying to make sure I get my lines correct. I'm looking at an unlined version. So starting on about line 24, we speak to these costs, this being in the public interest, and the costs being presumed to be reasonably and prudent, provided, and you see they line out competitive solicitation and procurements, cost of energy, and this puts a cap into the bill. So this is different than you've seen from either. So that is on line 28. We know that renewable energy, wind energy is more expensive. This reads a cap in that does not exceed 1.6 times the comparable cost of conventional simple cycle combustion turbine. So that reads a cap for the overall cost in, and then 3I speaks to this project being done between 24 and 28, which was in the original bill. Paragraph number 2 is different. It removes, and currently there's 100 basis point of enhanced rate in the code to incent wind energy, which was put in a bill 7 years ago. Since we are moving forward aggressively, we hope, on offshore wind, this removes that enhancement that is currently in the code. On page 3, we speak to the fact that, as we've discussed, this is more expensive energy, so we are passing the cost through with the exception of low-income residents. And this attempts to get at some of the larger industry and data centers that are already driving towards renewable energy and making strides themselves. So we work to carve them out because they're working on their own to get to a renewable basis that will be faster than this bill. There is someone here that I saw on the way in that takes exception to that, so we may want to hear from them in a moment. On paragraph 4, this speaks to low-income residential customers. So this is more expensive. They can opt out if they are a recipient of state or federally funded public assistance programs. So this directly tries to focus on low-income ratepayers and try to keep them from having to pay the increased cost. Section C is an enhanced version of economic development. This is largely Senator Lucas's language, but combines some of mine that just speaks to the fact that we're looking this as much as a renewable project as we are an economic development opportunity to build the supply chain in the United States of America, but particularly out of the Commonwealth of Virginia. You see B speaks to the economic development benefits, C to working with the Chief Workforce Development Officer and VEDP. D, priority given to local workers. And again, we're speaking to historically economic disadvantaged communities, trying to get as many people involved in this project, particularly from low-income areas, as we possibly can. Paragraph D speaks to competitive procurement, and that a substantial majority of services and equipment must be competitively procured, excuse me, Mr. Chairman, and then demonstrates economic development, so more economic development and capital improvement and job creation language. Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, Section E is the sole difference between Senator Lucas's bill and mine. I am a participant on the Atlantic States Marine Fisheries Commission, which is interesting to say the least. They are very focused on the proliferation of wind on the East Coast and what it does to both the environmental and the fisheries in and around these wind farms. And so this is our attempt to get out front of it and to look at best management practices to avoid adverse impacts to wildlife, natural resources, ecosystems, or any other water-dependent usage, which would be our fishing industries. So this tries to get us out front to looking at understanding that there is an impact and do what we can from the outside to avoid that. That paragraph is the difference between Senate Bill 860, which is mine, and 980, which is Senator Lucas's. Beyond that, the final, we are quarterly reporting on timeline and budget, and the State Corporation Commission retains ongoing authority to review the reasonableness and prudence of any increases that the projects may see. So, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, those are the two bills to the best of my knowledge.
Mr. Chairman. Surville.
Scott.
I have one after.
Surville. I guess question for the patron is,
Yes,
is
sir.
there any, with regard to paragraph E, which is in yours but not in Senator Lucas's, is there a reason that it's not in both?
You know, I had pressed the issue because I had seen it, quite frankly, on the 13-state East Coast Fisheries Management Board. So I'm not certain that it was something of interest to Senator Lucas. I'll let her speak for herself, but I think it's something we should get out in front of. That's the only reason it's different.
Okay.
And Mr. Chairman, we would like to have two vehicles, although very, very similar moving forward. Just, Lord knows what would happen provided we can get it out of this committee and our side down the road a piece.
All right. Senator Rabin.
Yes, and I don't know if this is for Senator Lewis or for Dominion. The extra costs incurred for the tests, or the costs incurred for having the turbine test thus far, who's paying for those costs? Is that the ratepayers or Dominion Corporation?
Well, my bill does not pertain to that, so I can
Okay, well,
ask
maybe
them.
something
And
Dominion can
this
help
This
with
is
that.
trying to read in keeping the momentum and going forward.
Okay.
But, I mean, I'm sure Bill can answer that but that does not pertain to Bill 860, just.
Senator Evan, the offshore wind pilot, you referred to the costs, and I'm recalling those as $300 million, were filed as, if you recall, the Grid Transformation Act, as what was called a customer credit offset in that act, effectively handled in base rates, was not done as a rate adjustment clause.
Senator Norman.
Senator Mason, going back, I have two areas of questions. Going back over to subparagraph B, and there's the affirmation again that this is in the public interest, but as the SCC is reviewing this, there's a language in there that this was presumed to be in the public interest. Is that shifting the burden of proof as a SCC or anybody else is reviewing this?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Norman, I do not believe so, sir, because it says the project is in the public interest. Then as we go down, we say that the reasonableness and prudence of such cost associated with the project are presumed to be reasonable and prudently incurred if in fact, and then we stick to number one, utilities complied with competitive. So if you have followed III, along the way, we are saying that we're presuming that those costs are reasonably and prudent. So it's public interest first for the project, sir, and then reasonably and prudent if you followed those steps.
Senator Norman.
Thank you.
Another question?
I do, and the next one is a little more sensitive, but going over to subparagraph C, little Roman numeral 4, and it says, given priority to hiring of local workers, including workers from historically economic disadvantaged communities.
Yes,
And then it goes on to define what is a historically economically disadvantaged community. And share with me why this is only focused on individuals of color. There are other communities of interest out there that are Latinos and Native Americans.
No question.
Why are they excluded?
And they should not be, sir, and you're right, it does say people of color and, so I think that's a good catch, Mr. Chairman,
It
excuse
really
me.
is.
And Mr. Chairman and Senator Norman, we could make that an or.
Yes.
Yeah, so I think that's a great
All
catch.
right, you hear the suggestion, the amendment before us?
Yes, I am.
All those in
That's a good
favor of
amendment.
That
adopting
is-
the word "or," say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, that's in the bill now.
And I thank the gentleman.
Mr. Chairman,
Senator
question.
Servo.
I'm still just confused why we're going with 2 vehicles. I just don't understand that.
Well, one's got, as he pointed out, his.
In the public interest.
This environmental thing with respect to sea life and bats and squirrels or whatever, and hers doesn't have that.
Mr. Chairman, I mean, I appreciate there's a difference in the bills, but I thought that's what committees are there to resolve. So I'm just not clear why we're going with 2 bills. That's what I don't understand.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Serval, I would like to keep 2 separate vehicles. I'm a lot more comfortable with what's going on in Commerce and Labor over here and on our chamber than I am maybe in another chamber, and like to make sure we have a couple of different options as we move things along.
And that's our agreement.
And Mr. Chairman, and that language was pressed and sold to me and not to Senator Lucas, so, you know.
They don't come to me very often.
You can be on the Atlantic States Marine Fisheries Commission if you'd like, ma'am.
Mr. Chairman, if we are going to have 2 vehicles, do we not need to amend the other bill so it says "or which are people of color"?
We would when we get there, yes.
Well,
Yeah, that will-
okay, whatever point's
we'll-
appropriate.
Do that. We'll get to Senator Lucas's bill in a second. Right now, we've got one before us.
Move report as amended.
Second.
All right, it's been moved and second that the,
Mr. Chairman,
eight,
have you heard from the opposition?
Oh, there
yeah.
was some.
Is there anyone want to speak in favor of the bill? And then those in opposition. By the way, it's been my observation over the years that if you seem to get the attention of the State Corporation Commission in cooperation if you put in there in the public interest than if you don't.
Mr. Chairman,
Senator Sewell.
since it's a subcommittee report, see that line lining up? Usually, I'm hoping that you could abide by report, because
Yeah.
we want to get out of here, you got 10 people want to speak.
Can
And
I
you
ask-
use wait a minute, don't chill. I'm trying to say something. I'm trying to say that line is long. They have heard this before in the subcommittee, so it shouldn't be this long anyway.
If this
So I'm
bill's
hoping,
been, if you all, any of you who have testified before the subcommittee, this, you had an ample time to hear it then. Just all you need to say, don't give me any explanation, just say in favor or against.
Mr. Chairman, suckling, Mr. Chairman, I'm hoping that we could at least limit it to 5 minutes, and 5 minutes, cut it off. Please, if you don't, you gotta keep on talking.
We're going to make it 3 minutes.
Mr. Chair-
Those in favor, just come up and say whether you're in favor or not, and then leave.
Mr. Chair, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
In light of what you just said, when you got the term in the public interest, as in this bill on line 14, doesn't that mean you're not only getting the State Corporation Commission's attention, but you're cutting them out of the decision-making? That's absolutely what you're doing, Mr. Chair.
Uh-huh, I understand that, but let me just give you a personal example. For 2 years in a row, this committee, or twice, this committee voted out, almost unanimously, okay, about undergrounding these distribution lines, not the transmission lines, the distribution lines. Twice, it was rejected by the SCC. Only when we put in there that it was in the public interest did it make it through. And as a result, the utilities are undergrounding these lines.
Well,
okay?
Mr. Chair, my point is that when you say it's in the public interest, that says to the State Corporation Commission, you don't have a decision to make anymore. We've already made the decision.
Not totally, but it's a hint. Okay, go ahead.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, Hayes Fromme with Ørsted, the world's largest offshore wind developer. We support the bill. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, Abby Watson, Head of Government Affairs for Siemens Gamesa in North America. We're the world's largest manufacturer of offshore wind turbines, looking to establish supply chain jobs here in Virginia, and we support the bill.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Ryan O'Toole representing Avangrid Renewables, the developer of the Kitty Hawk offshore wind project. We support the bill.
Mr. Chairman, Bill Murray, Dominion Energy, we support the bill.
Mr. Chairman, Bruce Burkett of the Mid-Atlantic Renewable Energy Coalition, we support the bill.
Mr. Chairman, Angela Navarro with the Governor's Office, we support the bill. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Jason Parker, Building Trades, we support the bill.
Mr. Chairman, Charles Skelly, IBEW Local 666 here in Richmond, Virginia. We support the bill.
Mr. Chairman, Virginia Building and Construction Trades Council, we support the bill.
Mr. Chair, members of committee, Emily Hasty on behalf of the Hampton Roads Chamber, and we support the bill.
Okay. And Mr. Chairman, I mentioned that Mr. Levy had addressed on paragraph 3 as I walked in, looking at lines 42 to 48. And so I think he wanted to speak to the committee in opposition.
Quickly.
Mr. Chairman, not in opposition, and I will recall in days past you offered blindfolds and cigarettes to folks in my position. Certainly appreciate some consideration in that regard. Data Center Coalition's trade association of data centers across the Commonwealth. Virginia has the largest data center market in the world by far. 2018, our economic impact resulted in over 45,000 jobs, paying more than $3.5 billion. As you all move forward with this legislation, we have been assured that we will continue to have discussions around the language. 2 items of specific concern: cost containment, and there are several amendments in this version of the legislation that begin to shrink that cost risk. That's very important because what you're going to do is create a cost differential for large consumers of electricity within Dominion's territory, which is going to be very different from those outside Dominion's territory, whether that be the co-ops directly across the street or utilities in other parts of the country. And there's concern about our ability to grow under those circumstances. So we're very hopeful that we'll continue to constrain costs. The second one, as Senator Mason indicated, is concern. A lot of data centers have been driving renewable development in Virginia. Real catalyst, Dominion has told us about 52% of all renewable energy in Virginia now are planned prior to this bill came from the data centers and investments they have made. Under this legislation, there is a narrow provision, and we're hoping to continue to work on that provision to recognize that there's been a lot of expense put forward. The way the bill's crafted now, data centers that continue to go with outside providers of electricity outside of Dominion to contract for 100% renewable energy would still have this surcharge leveled on them for wind energy that they're not using, and that creates a disincentive, I think, for folks that have been out front trying to really drive this clean energy transition. Mr. Chairman, I'm very appreciative of the time and also Senator Mason's indulgence in allowing me to state this.
Mr. Chairman, Brett Vassy, Virginia Manufacturers Association. We still have concerns about the SEC language has been commented. We also would like to see more work on the bypassable language. The reality for about 900 of Virginia's 2,600 manufacturers, they're energy intensive. If you force them to be captured under this and you drive rates up because it's a preference, and mind you, this project is twice as expensive as the next closest for renewable. So you're making a choice of a type of renewable, not just renewable. And if you force those companies to stay within it, some of them just can't compete under that price structure. So the reality is you won't be forcing them to buy the power, you'll be forcing them to move their jobs. So we want to continue to work on this and get it right so that we don't have to trade one industry for another, and we think that could be done before the end of session.
Next.
Mr. Chairman, Meade Browder with the Office of the Attorney General's Division of Consumer Counsel. We, of course, as you know, represent the millions of the utility customers that will be paying the bills. I'll be brief. First, I want to note that the Attorney General does recognize the benefits of large-scale offshore generation and the efforts that could lead to cleaning the state's economy. I want to say that this bill is, we believe, improved over the bill as introduced. We had a major concern that if there were cost overruns, of course, this project, one like it's never been done before in North America. It's very expensive. I believe about $8 billion is what's projected. But had there been cost overruns, the project ran into trouble. There was concern that the Commission may not have, may have its hands tied to do something about that on the back end. I believe the new enactment clause 2 addresses that, so we appreciate that change. But really, I think going towards maybe Senator Deeds' concerns, that's really our fundamental concern. The presumption of reasonableness and prudence for something this large in expense We just feel that determination, we recognize that the General Assembly has had exercised that prerogative before, but we just feel compelled to note that for something this expensive, before the ratepayers should be on the hook for those costs, we think they are best served in an evidentiary-type proceeding that the Commission typically conducts to examine costs of this nature. And I believe the Commission staff may have done some bill impact analysis.
Chairman, we got one more speaker left, taking up all the time.
Yes, just think it'd be important for you all to understand exactly what type of costs we're talking
Okay,
about.
thank you.
Yep, you're welcome.
Next.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I'm Kim Pate with the State Corporation Commission. Just wanted to bring up, we've been talking about cost here, and we had previously identified a cost for the subcommittee for the offshore wind bill impact, and we have modified it just because now there is no bonus return on equity or profit margin built in. So the number would now be $12 per month or $144 per year for a typical residential customer for the cost of the offshore wind.
Yeah, everybody wants renewables, but you all don't want anybody to pay for it. That's a problem. Okay,
I'm
but
just-
thank you very much. We appreciate you.
Certainly, we just quantified the numbers for you. Thank you.
All right.
What's that? Yeah, and Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I would say I think that's maybe the start, $12 with no supply chain, no economic development, no work being done here in Virginia. I think that is estimated to go down, and as it becomes more mature, you're talking about more in the $4 a month range. So.
All right, the bill's before us. The report. 860.
As amended.
As amended. The substitute is before us as amended. All those in favor of 860 vote aye. Those opposed, nay.
Ayes 11, noes 4.
Okay. Senator Lucas?